Rachel Reeves has managed to do something quite unusual for a Chancellor 3 weeks before a budget. She has frightened the people whose confidence she most needs. The Bank of England made that perfectly plain this morning. Its agents report that firms are postponing projects, households are holding back spending, and the single reason being whispered to Threadneedle Street is the same one being shouted in Westminster. Everybody expects the 26th of November budget to contain another tax raid, and they are already behaving as if it's already happened. So, first of all, the bank is ready to cut, but her signals are stopping it. The Monetary Policy Committee was split 5-4. That's a knife edge. 4 members want to cut at once. The governor used his casting vote to hold at 4%. Why hold when growth is flat? Vacancies are falling and unemployment is heading above 5%? Because the bank said it cannot tell yet whether the tax package Reeves is preparing will push prices back up or squeeze demand so sharply that the bank must cushion the blow. So policy is stuck in neutral, not because the data are unclear, but because the fiscal intentions are unclear. That is a poor position for a medium-sized open economy with a heavy debt load to be in. Uncertainty is now at post-trust levels. The bank's own survey shows the number of firms saying uncertainty is high or very high is now about the same level after the mini budget of 2022. That is a brutal comparison. Trust spooked markets with unfunded giveaways. Reeves is spooking them with half-signalled, possibly very large tax rises. Different direction, same effect. People waiting is the enemy of growth. If boards wait, investment pauses. If households wait, retail slows. When that happens for several quarters, you do not get a mild slowdown, you get a stall. And sterling, as you know, is a confidence thermometer. It doesn't only react to bad numbers, it reacts to policy fog. Right now, markets have to price 3 things at once. A bank that says inflation is heading down. B, a chancellor who hints that prices have to be squeezed further. And C, a tax path that could either support disinflation or, through higher administered charges and employer costs, push it up again. When traders cannot model the fiscal side, they ask for a higher risk premium on gilts, and if the premium persists, the pound looks softer than it otherwise would. That is precisely what the bank's critics mean when they talk about a moron premium returning. The more you pay more to borrow because the policy is hard to read. Reeves' warnings are therefore not harmless scene setting. They bleed into the exchange rate. We should be changing Rachel Reeves' name very soon. Not Rachel Reeves, but Rachel Leaves, and she cannot be too soon. Commentators have already started to reach for Dennis Healey because he too raised the basic rate after promising fairness. The parallel is not inflation at 25%. We're nowhere near that. It is the sense that Labour has decided tax is the main instrument and growth will simply have to wait its turn. Investors know how that story ended in the 1970s with higher borrowing costs and eventually the IMF, and they can spot early signs of the same habit now. Heavy signalling of tough choices, no structural pro-growth reform alongside it, and a central bank forced to keep policy tighter because fiscal is not yet credible. That is how confidence in a currency is worn down, not in a dramatic overnight plunge, but in a steady impression that the authorities prefer tax to supply. The tax mix that Rachel Reeves is trailing is growth negative. What do we actually expect on the 26th of November, given the pitch rolling? Extension of the income tax threshold freeze, possible ISA reforms, more pressure on partnerships and high-earning professionals, and almost certainly no broad-based cut to employer national insurance that would lower business costs. The bank has already said Reeves' last 25 billion jobs tax is one of the reasons labour costs stayed high and inflation overshot. To threaten more of the same and then wonder why firms are not hiring is extraordinary. It tells managers that adding a worker in Britain in 2026 may cost more than adding the same worker in Ireland or the Netherlands, so they will add the worker somewhere else, and that is how you stunt growth before you've even delivered the budget. The bank is already reporting that households describe the economy as flat. Retail bosses say customers are delaying purchases until all the news of the next few weeks comes through. Construction PMIs show projects being postponed because of the budget chatter. Those are present tense verbs. You do not need to wait for ONS to revise GDP in 2026 to see the damage. It is visible in October orders and November hiring, and when growth figures arrive thin, critics will not say global headwinds, they will say Labour frightened the country into its shell. That is the same sort of headline that Liz Truss managed to provide. The government did the damage. International money is perfectly willing to fund a tax-rising, high-spending UK if it thinks the money is buying future productive capacity, ports, grids, skills, defence industry, net zero kit. It is much less willing to fund a UK that says debts must fall so we must tax work, tax investment allowances, trim saver incentives while leaving planning, skills and energy reform slow. That package says managed decline, and currencies do not thrive on managed decline. So what would have been the sensible way to talk about this? First, state clearly that any new tax measures will be tilted towards idle wealth and distortive reliefs, not towards payroll or consumer demand. That lowers the growth hit. Second, publish the medium-term capital programme alongside the tax measures so investors can see that every pound raised is matched by a pound that lifts capacity. Third, show you understand the interaction with monetary policy. If the bank is on the cusp of cutting, the Chancellor should not talk in a way that forces it to wait. At present, Reeves is doing the opposite. She is pushing the bank into caution. There is a fourth point that I should make. If you really want to be sensible, if you really want to be a sensible Chancellor, or if you really want to run a sensible Treasury, the first thing you do is shut your mouth. And Reeves doesn't know how to shut her mouth. She will be weeping at the dispatch box within weeks because she has not done those things. Her threats land exactly as that, threats. Businesses are hearing more cost, unclear reward. Households are hearing higher taxes, still no relief on energy and housing. Markets are hearing politically boxed-in Chancellor, weak growth, still elevated inflation. None of that supports the pound. None of that supports gilt yields. None of that supports a recovery in 2026. The harsh conclusion is this. Reeves wanted to reassure the city. Instead, she has repeated the Truss-era lesson in reverse. It is not only unfunded tax cuts that can sap confidence. Aggressively trailing tax rises without a matching growth narrative can do it too. Right now, the bank is talking like the grown-up in the room, cautious, waiting for data, worried about jobs. The Treasury is talking like a cornered debtor. That inversion is what is really unsettling people. Until she fixes it, the pound will trade with a question mark over it, and growth will continue to be the price of fiscal theatre. Rachel Reeves has already shown that she is incapable of running this country's finances. Rachel Reeves has already demonstrated ably and clearly that she is not fit to be Chancellor. And she's not even stood at the dispatch box and done her November piece of puppetry. She's already spooked the markets as much as Liz Truss did.